My name is Jessica Miller. I'm 24 years old, and I come from Denver, Colorado. I used to think that hard work was enough. I believed that if you poured every ounce of your energy into a goal, the people who were supposed to love you would eventually have to see it. They would have to be proud. I held on to that belief through 4 years of sleepless nights, greasy aprons, and library stacks that smelled like old paper and forgotten coffee. On the day I finally walked across the stage to receive my college diploma, my parents claimed they were too tired to come. I believed them until I saw their smiling photos on social media, posted at the exact moment my name was being called. That betrayal cut deeper than any exam I'd ever failed, and it taught me a lesson that no textbook ever could. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Being the first in your family to go to college sounds like an honor, and in some ways, it is. It's a heavy title, though, one that you carry on your shoulders every single day. For me, it wasn't a badge of pride that my family wore. It was a source of suspicion, a quiet but constant annoyance. My parents, Karen and Douglas Miller, were simple people. They believed in a simple life. You graduate high school, you get a steady job, you find someone to marry, and you stay close to home. My dreams were not simple. They were big and messy and inconvenient. I remember the day my acceptance letter to the University of Colorado arrived. It was a thick, pristine envelope, and my hand shook as I opened it at the kitchen table. The word congratulations seemed to jump off the page, and for a breathless moment, I felt like I was flying. I looked up at my parents, my face aching from smiling so hard, expecting to see a reflection of my joy. Instead, I saw tired resignation. My father, Douglas, took a long sip of his beer and set the bottle down with a heavy thud. "Well, don't get your hopes up, Jess," he said, not even looking at the letter. "You know how much that place costs. It's for rich kids." My mother, Karen, was gentler, but her words were just as sharp. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her gaze fixed on the sink. "A community college would be just as good, dear. You're overthinking life, wasting money on books when you could be saving for a down payment on a house." My younger sister, Emily, leaned against the doorframe, scrolling through her phone. She was 2 years younger than me, the golden child, the one who never overthought anything. Her life was a highlight reel of cheerleading trophies, popular friends, and a string of handsome boyfriends. She smirked without looking up. "I guess you like being broke." That was the moment the battle lines were drawn. My dream wasn't something for us to share. It was my problem to solve. My scholarship, which covered a little over half my tuition, wasn't a reason to celebrate. To them, it was just proof of how much was still left to pay. They didn't see the opportunity, they saw the burden. Life at home became a series of humiliations. Family dinners were the worst. My achievements were met with silence, while Emily's were dissected and celebrated for hours. One evening, I came home after getting an A on a calculus midterm that nearly broke me. I'd studied for weeks, fueled by cheap coffee and sheer panic. I mentioned it over dinner, my voice small. I got in 98 on my midterm. I hoped for a nod, a smile, anything. My dad grunted and pointed his fork at Emily. Tell your mother what happened at practice today." And just like that, I was invisible. Emily launched into a dramatic story about a new cheer routine, her hands waving as she described the pyramid they were attempting. My mother listened, completely captivated, asking questions and laughing at all the right moments. My 98 in calculus, a class that felt like climbing a mountain in the dark, was already forgotten. It evaporated into the steam rising from the mashed potato. Holidays were just as bad. The year I turned 20, Emily turned 18. For her birthday, my parents threw a massive party in the backyard and bought her a brand new used car, a little red sedan they'd found at a dealership. It was parked in the driveway with a giant bow on it. For my birthday, 2 months later, I got a text from my mom. "Happy birthday! Love you!" That was it. When I came home for Christmas, their gift to me was a set of cheap towels for my dorm room. They were a practical, thoughtless gift, the kind of thing you buy when you have no idea who a person really is. Emily got a designer handbag she'd been talking about for months. She paraded it around the living room while my mother beamed. "This is what happens when you're not wasting all your money on tuition," Emily said with a wink at me. The whole family laughed. I just sat there, clutching my mug of hot chocolate, feeling the warmth of it, but none of the comfort. The distance grew with every phone call. I would call home, exhausted from a double shift at the diner, my clothes smelling of grease and my feet aching. I tried to tell my mom about a fascinating lecturer or a professor who had encouraged me, desperate for a connection. "Oh, honey, that sounds hard," she would say, her voice distant, distracted. I could hear the television in the background. "Listen, I have to go. Emily just made the homecoming court. We're all so excited. The whole town is buzzing." Her excitement was a wall I could never climb over. It was reserved for Emily's world of football games and school spirit, a world I had left behind for something they couldn't or wouldn't understand. They weren't just unsupportive, they were actively dismissive. They treated my ambition like a strange, temporary illness they hoped I would soon recover from. My independence wasn't a strength, it was an insult to their way of life. They mocked it as reckless, as if paying my own bills and chasing my own dreams was an act of defiance against them. And maybe, in a way, it was. I stopped talking about my struggles. I never told them about the nights I ate instant noodles for dinner 3 times in a row, or the time my car broke down and I had to use my textbook money to fix it, forcing me to spend the rest of the semester using the library's copy. I never told them about the loneliness, the feeling of being an outsider both at home and at a university full of kids whose parents were paying for everything. I built a wall around my heart, brick by brick, because it was less painful than reaching out and finding no one there. I told myself their approval didn't matter, but it was a lie. A desperate, foolish lie. Deep down, I was still that little girl at the kitchen table, holding up a piece of paper, begging them to be proud of me. And I was convinced that graduation would be the day they finally were. Graduation. The word itself felt sacred. It was more than just a ceremony. It was the finish line of a 4-year marathon I had run completely on my own. It was the culmination of every 16-hour day, every shift I'd picked up at the diner, every tutoring session I'd squeezed in between classes. It was the proof that their doubts were wrong, that my dream wasn't a waste. In my mind, this one day would make it all worth it. The preparations started months in advance. The final semester was a blur of all-nighters, term papers, and final exams. I felt a different kind of exhaustion now, one mixed with exhilaration. The end was in sight. My professors, who had watched me struggle and persevere, offered words of encouragement. Professor Albright, my literature mentor, pulled me aside after my final presentation. "Jessica, your parents must be bursting with pride. You've worked harder than any student I've had in years. Make sure they get a good seat for the ceremony." Her words were a balm on a wound I didn't realize was still so raw. "I will," I promised, my voice thick with emotion. Her simple acknowledgement meant more to me than she could ever know. It was a glimpse of the validation I craved from my own family. The email arrived about securing graduation tickets. 4 guests per student. I didn't even hesitate. I reserved 4 tickets, 1 to keep as a memento, and 3 for them, Mom, Dad, and Emily. I pictured it perfectly. I pictured them sitting together in the auditorium, my dad in his best shirt, my mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue, maybe even Emily looking up from her phone for a few seconds to watch me. I imagined them scanning the program, finding my name printed in black ink, Jessica Miller, Bachelor of Science, magna cum laude. A wave of pride, a sense of shared victory. That's what I dreamed of. I called them the day I picked up my cap and gown. I was in my small dorm room, the black fabric laid out on my bed. It felt heavy, important. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice buzzing with excitement. "I just got my cap and gown. It's all starting to feel real." "Oh, that's nice, dear," she replied. Her tone was flat, the same one she used when I told her about the weather. I could hear the clatter of pots and pans in the background. She was making dinner. So the ceremony is at 2 o'clock on Saturday, I continued, pushing past the disappointment. I have 3 tickets waiting for you. They're really good seats, right in the center section. There was a pause. Saturday, you said? Douglas was thinking of fixing the fence this weekend, and Emily has that party to go to. My heart did a painful little flip. Mom, I said, my voice quieter now. This is my graduation. I spent 4 years working for this. It's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. Please. I hated the pleading tone in my voice, but I couldn't help it. I needed them there. She sighed, a long, weary sound that made me feel like I was the heaviest burden in her life. All right, Jessica, don't be so dramatic. We'll be there. Just text me the details. Relief washed over me, so potent it left me weak. Okay, I will. Thank you, Mom. It means so much to me. Okay, honey, I have to go. The chicken is burning. The line went dead. She had said yes. That's what I clung to. For the next 2 weeks, I lived on that fragile promise. I booked a table at a nice restaurant for a celebratory dinner afterward, a place I couldn't really afford but wanted to treat them to. I bought a new dress to wear under my gown. I practiced my walk, imagined hearing my name, and pictured myself looking out into the crowd and seeing their faces. I let myself believe that this time it would be different. This time I would be enough. The hope was a dangerous, beautiful thing, and I let it fill all the empty spaces inside me. The night before graduation was supposed to be filled with excitement. My friends and I were planning to have a quiet night in, watching movies and getting to bed early. I was in my room, carefully ironing my graduation gown, when my phone rang. It was my mom. A sense of dread coiled in my stomach. It was too late for a casual chat. Hi, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. Everything okay? Jess, hi. Her voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. It was her, I have bad news and I don't want to deal with your feelings about it, voice. I knew it well. What's wrong? I asked, my hands stilling on the hot iron. Listen, about tomorrow, she began, and my heart sank into the floor. My father and I were just exhausted. Work has been so draining this month, and Douglas's back is really acting up. We just don't have the energy to make that drive across town and sit in a stuffy auditorium for 3 hours. The excuses were so flimsy, so transparent, I could almost see through them. My father's back magically acted up whenever there was an event for me he didn't want to attend. Work was always draining. These weren't reasons. They were scripts they had used 100 times before. And Emily has been so stressed out lately. You know how she gets. She just needs a quiet weekend at home. Emily? Stressed? Her biggest stressor was deciding which filter to use on her latest Instagram post. The absurdity of it all made me want to scream, but I didn't. A lifetime of conditioning had taught me that my anger was an inconvenience. My disappointment was a burden, so I swallowed it. I swallowed the rage and the hurt until they formed a hard, bitter lump in my throat. I pressed my lips together, took a deep, shaky breath, and said the words I had always said. The words they expected to hear. Oh, I said, forcing a lightness I didn't feel. Okay, I understand. My voice sounded strange, like it was coming from someone else. It was the voice of a girl who had learned not to ask for too much. We're still so proud of you, honey, she said, the words automatic, meaningless. It was like reading a line from a greeting card. We'll celebrate with you some other time. Maybe next week we can all go out for pizza. Pizza? She was offering me pizza to make up for missing the single most important milestone of my life? The insult was so profound, so carelessly delivered, that all I could do was stare at the wall of my dorm room, at the calendar with graduation circled in bright red marker. "Yeah, Mom," I whispered. "That sounds great." "Okay, good. Well, you have a wonderful day tomorrow. Take lots of pictures for us. Love you." "Love you too," I lied. And the call ended. The silence in the room was deafening. I slowly placed the iron back on its stand and sank onto my bed, my hand resting on the smooth, black fabric of the gown. I didn't cry. I felt strangely hollow, as if someone had reached inside me and scooped everything out. I had spent 4 years fighting for this day, and they couldn't even be bothered to drive across town. They weren't just tired, they didn't care. The thought was so cold, so sharp. It felt like a piece of ice lodging itself in my chest. But even then, a stupid, foolish part of me tried to rationalize it. I told myself it was okay. I told myself they were just being honest about being tired. At least they cared enough to call, I thought. That pathetic little crumb of affection was all I had, and I clung to it like a life raft. Graduation day was bright and sunny, the kind of perfect May morning that belongs on a postcard. The campus was buzzing with energy. Families were everywhere, carrying bouquets of flowers and shiny balloons, their faces beaming with pride. Fathers were adjusting their sons' ties. Mothers were wiping away tears as they took pictures of their daughters in their caps and gowns. Every happy family I saw was a fresh stab of pain. I felt like I was watching a movie of a life I wasn't allowed to have. I got ready in my silent dorm room, the one I would be moving out of in a week. I put on my new dress, zipped up the black gown, and adjusted the cap on my head. I looked at myself in the small, cracked mirror on the back of my door. I looked like a graduate. I looked like someone who had accomplished something, but I felt like a fraud. An imposter who had accidentally wandered into someone else's celebration. Walking to the auditorium was the hardest part. I saw my friend Sarah being hugged by her entire family, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles. They were all wearing shirts with her face on them that said, "Our favorite graduate." They cheered when they saw her, and she buried her face in her father's shoulder, laughing. I quickly looked away, my eyes burning. Inside, the air was thick with excitement and the scent of perfume and hairspray. The room was a sea of black caps and brightly colored cords. I found my assigned seat with the other science graduates. The seats were alphabetical, so I didn't have any friends next to me. I was just another anonymous face in the crowd. Before the ceremony began, I couldn't stop myself. I turned around and looked up at the stands, my eyes searching for the section where I had reserved my seats. Section 204, row G, seats 12, 13, and 14. It didn't take long to find them. They were exactly as I knew they would be. Empty. 3 stark blue plastic seats in a row, an island of nothingness and an ocean of smiling, waving people. They were so painfully, humiliatingly empty. My chest tightened until it felt hard to breathe. I quickly turned back around, fixing my eyes on the stage, and didn't look back again. The speeches started. The dean, the valedictorian, the guest speaker. Their words washed over me, a meaningless drone. All I could hear was the frantic, panicked beating of my own heart. All I could feel was the weight of those 3 empty chairs. They were a physical manifestation of every doubt I had ever had about myself, every dismissive word from my parents, every time I'd been made to feel small and insignificant. Then they started calling the names. They were moving through the alphabet at a steady pace. Jones, Keller, Lee. My row stood up, and we began to file towards the stage. My legs felt like lead. My hands were clammy. This was the moment I had dreamed of for 4 years. This was supposed to be my victory. Jessica Miller, magna cum laude. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. A polite wave of applause rippled through the auditorium from the strangers in the crowd. I forced a smile onto my face, a tight, painful stretch of my lips. I walked across the stage, my eyes fixed straight ahead. I shook the dean's hand, accepted the diploma holder, and kept walking. The applause felt hollow, distant. It wasn't for me. It was just noise. The whole thing took maybe 15 seconds. 15 seconds to mark the end of 4 years of my life. As I walked back to my seat, I felt 1,000 eyes on me. I knew it was just my imagination, but I felt exposed, as if everyone in that room could see those empty seats and knew exactly what they meant. They knew I was the girl whose family didn't show up. I sat down, clutching the empty leather folder in my lap, and I felt nothing. No pride, no joy, no relief. Just a vast, aching emptiness where my family was supposed to be. The rest of the ceremony was a blur. When it was finally over, the air filled with cheers and the sound of caps being thrown into the air. I just stood there, holding mine in my hands. People were hugging, crying, taking pictures. I was an island in the middle of it all, completely alone. My friend Sarah found me a few minutes later, her face flushed with excitement. "Jess, you did it! We did it!" she yelled, throwing her arms around me. "Where are your parents? My family wants to meet them." The question I had been dreading all day. "Oh," I said, pulling away gently. They couldn't make it. My dad's not feeling well." The lie tasted like ash in my mouth. Sarah's face fell with sympathy. "Oh no, I'm so sorry." "Well, you have to come to dinner with us. We're not letting you celebrate alone." I appreciated her kindness more than she knew, but the thought of sitting with her big, happy, loving family was more than I could bear. "Thanks, Sarah, but I think I'm just going to go home and crash. I'm really tired." It was their excuse, but for me, it was the truth. I was so tired. A bone-deep exhaustion that had nothing to do with a lack of sleep. I gave her one last hug, promised to call her tomorrow, and slipped out of the auditorium before anyone else could talk to me. I walked back across campus, my gown flapping in the breeze, the diploma holder a dead weight in my hand. I didn't want to celebrate. I just wanted to disappear. That evening, the silence in my dorm room was a physical presence. My cap and gown were thrown in a heap on my desk chair, and the diploma holder lay unopened on my bed. It was over. I had done it, but there was no triumph, only a dull, persistent ache in my chest. My friends were out with their families, their phones buzzing with congratulatory messages. Mine was silent. I ordered a pizza, the cheapest one on the menu, and sat on my floor eating it out of the box. I felt numb, disconnected from everything. To escape the quiet, I did what everyone does. I opened my phone and started to scroll. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, a meaningless stream of other people's perfect lives. Pictures of my classmates in their gowns, surrounded by proud parents, captions full of gratitude and love. Each post was another small twist of the knife. I was about to close the app when a notification popped up at the top of my screen. It was from Facebook. Karen Miller has added new photos. My first thought was a flicker of hope. Maybe she had posted an old picture of me as a kid with a message saying they were sorry they missed it. Maybe this was their way of celebrating from afar. My finger hovered over the notification for a second before I tapped it. The screen refreshed, and my mother's post loaded. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't a picture of me. It was an album of 3 photos. The first photo showed my mother, my father, and my sister Emily standing on a wooden dock. Behind them was a sparkling blue lake surrounded by green mountains. They were all wearing sunglasses and bright summer clothes. They were smiling, wide, genuine, carefree smiles. My dad had his arm around my mom, and Emily was making a peace sign for the camera. They looked happy. They looked relaxed. They looked anything but tired. My hands started to shake. I clicked to the next photo. It was a close-up of 3 colorful cocktails, garnished with little paper umbrellas, sitting on a table overlooking the water. The third photo was a selfie of the 3 of them, their heads close together, laughing. My mother's face was glowing with joy. Then I read the caption. It was written in a cheerful, bubbly font. Much-needed family getaway, soaking up the sun at the lake and enjoying some downtime. Hashtag family first, hashtag blessed, hashtag weekend vibes. My blood ran cold. A getaway. They weren't at home. They weren't resting. They were on a vacation. The word family first burned on the screen, a cruel, mocking joke. But the final blow, the one that shattered what was left of my heart, was the timestamp. It was posted at 2:15 p.m. I glanced at the clock on my phone. Then I checked the graduation program I had tossed on my nightstand. The ceremony schedule was printed inside. The calling of names for the College of Arts and Sciences began at 2 p.m. Miller, my name, would have been called around 2:10 p.m. At the exact moment I was walking across the stage, the single most significant moment of my academic life, they were posing for pictures. They were sipping cocktails. They were laughing by a lake. They hadn't been too tired. They hadn't been stressed. They hadn't been sick. They had lied. They had chosen a fun day trip over their own daughter's college graduation. And they hadn't just skipped it. They had replaced it. They had created a new, better family memory without me, on the very day that was supposed to be about me. The betrayal was so complete, so calculated, that I couldn't breathe. The pizza in my stomach turned to stone. The numb emptiness I'd been feeling all day was gone, replaced by a roaring, white-hot pain. Tears finally came, blurring my vision until the smiling faces on the screen became a cruel, distorted mess. They weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of rage. Rage at their selfishness. Rage at my own stupidity for ever believing them, for ever hoping for more. I sat there, on the floor of my empty room, the glow of my phone illuminating my tear-streaked face, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that something inside me had just broken for good. I couldn't look away from the screen. It was like staring at the scene of a car crash. I scrolled down, my thumb trembling, and began to read the comments under their post. Each one was a fresh wave of agony. My Aunt Carol wrote, "Looks gorgeous. You all deserve a break. So proud of my beautiful family." Proud of what? I wanted to scream. For abandoning your niece on her graduation day? My cousin Mark chimed in, "Where's my invite? Ha ha, looks like a perfect family day." A perfect family day. The words echoed in the silent room. Everyone saw a perfect family. No one seemed to notice that someone was missing. No one asked, "Where's Jessica?" It was the ultimate confirmation of what I had always suspected. In the story of my family, I was not a main character. I wasn't even a supporting role. I was a footnote, easily skipped over and forgotten. The worst part was, they weren't even trying to hide it. They had posted it publicly for the whole world to see. They didn't care if I saw it. They didn't care if I knew the truth. My feelings, my moment, my 4 years of sacrifice, none of it was important enough to even warrant a discreet lie. Their casual, public cruelty was what broke me. The tears that had been blurring my vision now flowed freely, hot and silent. It wasn't loud, hysterical sobbing. It was a quiet, desolate grief, the kind you feel when you finally accept a death. And something had died in that moment. The little girl inside me who had spent her entire life trying to earn her parents' love, She was gone. In her place, something new was beginning to form, something hard and cold and sharp. My mind flashed back through a lifetime of similar moments. The school plays they missed because they had to take Emily to cheer practice. The academic award ceremony they skipped because they were too busy. Every time I had made an excuse for them, to my friends, to my teachers, to myself. They're just busy. They don't understand the stuff. They love me in their own way. All of it was a lie. A carefully constructed fantasy I had built to protect myself from the simple, ugly truth. They did not value me. The pain was so immense, so physical, that I had to wrap my arms around myself. I felt a knot of rage tightening in my stomach. It was a different kind of anger than I had ever felt before. It wasn't explosive or loud. It was a slow, quiet burn. It was the kind of anger that doesn't scream. It plans. It waits. They thought I was disposable. They thought I would just swallow this disappointment like I had swallowed all the others. They thought I would call them next week and pretend everything was fine just to keep the peace. They were expecting me to show up for Christmas and smile as they talked about their wonderful trip to the lake. They were counting on my silence. They were counting on me to protect their image as a perfect family. I looked from the phone screen to the diploma holder on my bed. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked over to it. I opened it. Inside was the piece of paper I had worked so hard for. My name, my degree, the university seal. It was real. I had earned this. I had done this without them. I had done this in spite of them. The tears slowed. My breathing steadied. The fire inside me wasn't just pain anymore. It was fuel. They had made their choice. They had posted their story for the world to see. Now I would post mine. I didn't act out of impulse. For a long hour, I sat on my bed, the diploma in my hands, and let the cold resolve settle over me. My pain was a private thing, but their betrayal was public. The whispers and polite questions from friends and professors would follow me for weeks if I said nothing. How was celebrating with your family? Did your parents just love the ceremony? I was tired of making excuses for them. I was tired of lying to protect their reputation while they shattered my heart. The revenge I envisioned wasn't loud or dramatic. I wasn't going to write a long, angry post tagging them and exposing every detail. That would make me look bitter and unhinged. It would give them the power to paint me as the difficult, overly emotional daughter. No, my response had to be just like them. Simple, public, and devastating in its quiet implication. I scrolled through the photos on my phone from the day. There were a few blurry selfies and a picture a classmate had taken of me walking off the stage. Then I found the one. A stranger, a kind-looking mother who had been sitting near the stage, had offered to take a picture of me after the ceremony. "You should have one by yourself to remember this," she'd said. In the photo, I was standing alone on the campus lawn, the auditorium in the background. I was in my full cap and gown, holding my diploma. I wasn't smiling, a huge fake grin. It was a small, tired, but determined smile. It was a picture of a survivor. It was perfect. I opened Instagram. I uploaded the photo. Then I thought about the caption. Every word had to be perfect. Every word had to be a scalpel. I typed and deleted several versions. Finally, I settled on 6 words. 6 simple, undeniable words. First in the family, did it alone. And then I added 2 more. Worth it. I read it one last time. It was everything I wanted to say. It was proud, but not arrogant. It was sad, but not self-pitying. It was a statement of fact. It told the whole story without telling any of it. I took a deep breath and hit share. For a few minutes, nothing happened. Then the first like appeared, then another, then a comment from my friend Sarah. "So proud of you, Jess. You are an inspiration." Then a comment from Professor Albright. "Congratulations, Jessica. A well-deserved achievement." The support started to pour in from my world, the world I had built for myself, the one my family had no part in. It felt good. It felt like I was finally being seen. But I was waiting for the other world to notice. It took about an hour. The first sign was a comment from a distant cousin. "Congrats! Where were Karen and Doug?" Then one of my mom's friends from her church group wrote, "What a beautiful picture, Jessica. So proud of you, honey. I'm surprised I didn't see your mom post anything today." The whispers had begun. The ripples were spreading. I put my phone down and tried to sleep, but my mind was buzzing. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications. My post had been shared by friends and their friends, but more importantly, I had a text message. It was from Emily. "You need to take that post down now." I stared at the words. No hello, no congratulations, just a demand. I didn't reply. A minute later, my phone rang. It was her. I let it go to voicemail. She immediately texted again. "Jess, I'm serious. Aunt Carol called Mom this morning asking why we weren't at your graduation. Everyone is asking questions. You're making us look bad." You're making us look bad? That was it. That was all that mattered to them. Not my pain, not their betrayal, just their public image. The sheer, unadulterated selfishness of it was breathtaking. A cold calm washed over me. I typed back a single word. No. I blocked her number. Then an unknown number called. I ignored it. Then a text from my dad's number, clearly typed by my mother. "Jessica, this is childish. Take the post down and stop causing drama." I blocked their numbers too. I turned my phone off. For the first time in my life, I was refusing to manage their feelings. I was refusing to be the family shock absorber. The truth was out there, quiet and simple, and I was going to let it do its work. Their shame was not my burden to carry. Not anymore. In the week that followed, I moved out of my dorm and into a small, temporary apartment I found online. The silence from my family was absolute. But the noise from the rest of the world was deafening. I heard through the grapevine of cousins and family friends that my parents were being bombarded with questions. At church, at the grocery store, at family barbecues they could no longer avoid. Their carefully crafted image of the perfect family was cracking under the weight of one simple, honest Instagram post. They tried to lie, saying there was a family emergency, but their own social media post contradicted them. They were trapped in the truth. Emily, I heard, was furious. Her friends were asking her about it at school. She was embarrassed by the association. The golden child was finally feeling the heat, and she didn't like it. I didn't revel in their misery. I didn't feel a triumphant surge of joy. Instead, what I felt was a profound sense of release. It was the feeling of a heavy, invisible weight being lifted off my shoulders, a weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying my whole life, the weight of trying to be good enough for them. A month later, I packed my few belongings into my old car and drove away from Denver. I had accepted a job offer in Portland, Oregon, a city where no one knew my family, where I could be just Jessica, not the daughter who was second best. My new life was waiting. I didn't tell my parents I was leaving. I sent a postcard to my aunt, knowing the news would get back to them. I cut the financial and emotional ties completely. There was no dramatic confrontation, no tearful goodbye. Our relationship didn't end with a bang. It ended with the quiet click of a door closing behind me. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't consumed by hatred. I was just free. free from the endless cycle of hope and disappointment, free from the need for their approval. Their absence on my graduation day was not the tragedy I thought it was. It was a gift. They had finally shown me in the clearest way possible that I could not depend on them for my own happiness or sense of worth. I had to find it in myself. And I had. Sitting in my new apartment in Portland, watching the rain fall outside my window, I thought about that day. I thought about the empty seats, the fake smile, the crushing discovery. The best part of my graduation day wasn't walking across the stage. It wasn't the diploma itself. The best part was the realization that followed. The best part of that day wasn't their absence. It was realizing I don't need their presence to define me. Have you ever been abandoned or betrayed on a day that should have been special? Drop your story in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of betrayal, survival, and poetic justice. Because sometimes the truth comes out in the quietest way.